Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is your host, Mr. Pugh, coming at you with an installment of Kingdom Minded Conversations. And the topic of today's discussion is going to be obedience. Why obedience? Because, quite frankly, I struggle with this. I struggle with this pretty badly. Um, and in my case, it's mostly to do with being disobedient to what God is calling me to do. Um, so if you've listened to any of my messages, you know that roughly 8 months to a year ago, I was having a conversation with God, trying to figure out what I could do for the kingdom to be a good disciple, to win souls for the kingdom. And so, me and God had a conversation one day while I was at work, and this is what came to me, to do a some sort of a podcast or recording online where I could, have these types of conversations and release it out to the people, and then the people have an option of whether to, go and listen to what I had to say or not. And so it seemed simple enough. Seemed like it shouldn't be too difficult. It was something that didn't necessarily require me to step out of my comfort zone to where I had to be around people, but could still be obedient to um, uh, what God was asking me to do. Um, and so, you know, um, even bringing it down to a level to where I could do it and not be uncomfortable. And that's part of the problem. You got to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to be made uncomfortable in order to serve God. I mean, because all that choose to serve Him will suffer some type of persecution or hardship, and it's not going to always be a comfortable feeling. In fact, I think the majority of the time it'll be uncomfortable because we're stepping outside of ourselves. We're dying to our own self and our own will and desires, and adopting His, right? So I said all that to say, even though He kind of allowed me to tailor this thing down and, still be obedient by getting the message out, but allow me to stay within my comfort zone. Even with Him accommodating me in that way, I still struggle with being obedient and just doing the work, doing the messages, right? And really all it requires is for me to take some time and study the Word, and then set aside some time to actually record the message, and then the time it takes to upload it. So what is it really costing me, other than my time? And if I can't honor the Lord with my time, why should He honor me with anything, right? I mean, it's just my time. So He's been dealing with me about that, and that is how we got to this message of this conversation on obedience. And so that's kind of where we're at. So what are what specific areas of disobedience am I struggling with? Well, first off, as I've said, was the assignment. Just doing the assignment. And it's not that I don't want to do it, it's just that I allow other things to take precedence over it. I don't I don't necessarily give it the attention it needs and that it deserves. It should be one of my first priorities to get that done because it's the work of the Lord, right? However, every little thing else gets in the way. So some of one of the main obstacles I face with that is procrastination. So and I'll give you an example. I have right now about 2 or 3 messages that are set aside. Even this one that I'm doing right now, obedience, on obedience, was one that I put together a couple days ago. and I was intent to do this message on, I believe it was Friday that just passed. Today is the 16th, I believe. I'm sorry, today is the 17th of May, and I was intending to do this message back on the 13th, which was a Friday, on obedience, because that was my first day off from my job. And when that time came, I even had a idea in my mind of the time that I was going to do it and everything. And somehow, some way, I let other things get in the way. Those are some other aspects of disobedience: distractions, and laziness, even laziness. Um, so a message that I'm just now getting to, 3-4 days later, should have been already done, and could have taken me no more than, probably would have took me no more than, just with the notes that I have here, probably would have took no more than about 20 minutes to get the message out. Yet here I am 3-4 days later, and just now doing it. And even now, I wasn't even going to do it when I did it. This came after I experienced some medical difficulty on the previous night, and went and had to go, bad enough to where I had to go get checked out at the ER. And fortunately, it turned out to be nothing seriously medically wrong, and they released me. But I had already had in the back of my mind of why I was experiencing this, and this was primarily because of my disobedience. If you didn't know, your disobedience can be directly tied to whatever health issues you may be experiencing in your life. It may very well be because it may not be any specific medical diagnosis or cause to it. It could just simply be your disobedience to following what God has instructed you to do, and He will allow these types of things to get your attention, to get you to consider that, hey, there's something I need to do. And if you look in the Bible, there's plenty of people that were called to do something by God, and because they didn't do it, they experienced some sort of hardship, and it didn't necessarily have to be a medical condition, but it could be. So as I was saying, I had already in my mind that this was because of my disobedience that I was experiencing this medical trial. And on the way to the ER, my wife started praying, actually, and I started kind of just agreeing with her and praying to myself as she was praying, kind of calling out certain things myself. And I would say about a good 40% of that my prayer was based on the fact of me being disobedient and asking God to forgive me and continue to have mercy and grace on me. And I didn't specifically mention that to my wife. That was just meted out. That was just something I was, that was something I was calling out to Him on, kind of, under my breath in silence. And then later that night, I don't know if it was when we were on the way back or if it was later that night when we finally laid down, but I think my wife asked me something to the effect of, why do you think this episode came upon you? Is there, no, she said something to the effect of, there's something that you keep, that there's a thought that keeps repeating in your head. What is it? And oddly enough, there was a thought that kept repeating in my head. And she's like, yeah, there's something that you keep, that keeps repeating in your head, and it's what is the enemy saying to you? What is it? What's that thought in your head? And I said, it's disobedience. in the specific way she framed it, or she said it, she said, "What is the enemy lying to you about?" And I said, I was like, "Babe, I don't. In this instance, I don't think he's lying to me about it, because I can honestly say I have been disobedient. So it's not that he's lying to me, but he is taunting me with it. Just like, you get this simple assignment, and you even got it framed the way that you ask God to do, to allow you to be able to do it, so that you didn't have to be uncomfortable, and you can't even do that, right? You can't even do that. You're still struggling with it. You're still not being obedient to what he's asking you to do." And that was a thought that kept ripping in my head. And when she said, "Well, what is he lying to you?" But I was like, well, he's not lying. He's accurate, because I'm doing that. But here's the thing. I want to be obedient. So why is it so difficult? Why am I struggling so hard with this? Even with having it framed in a way that I can do it and not necessarily be uncomfortable. Why am I still struggling with being obedient? And so that's when I said I kind of got down to some of the core reasonings for it. One of them being the procrastination, which I was talking about. Like I said, I've had this message for several days now, and hadn't done it. And I wouldn't have done it today. That's what I was saying. I wouldn't have done it today had it not been for my wife coming in here and saying, "Babe, before you get on before you start doing anything else that you're going to do," all right? Because I pretty much been in bed all day, just recovering from the incident last night. And thank God, I give God the honor and glory that it was no serious medical conditions, that this was something that, it was just an attention getter, I would say. But literally just getting out of the bed after being in bed pretty much all day. It's now, 4:00 in the afternoon? Yeah. Just now getting out of bed. And the first thing I did was not come in here and jump on this word and be obedient like I know because I know, I know that my issue has been tied, or I believe rather that this issue was tied to my disobedience. And rather than come in here and be obedient, I came into my office here and began to get distracted yet again. And it took my wife, which I don't believe it was just her. I think she was unctioned by the Spirit of God to go, "Hey, go talk to your husband, because he's finna do it again." And sure enough, I was finna get distracted and do it again, even after just having been quote unquote spanked, for my disobedience. I didn't get the message. So she came in here, and it wasn't a forceful thing. She just came in, and that's one thing with me. A lot of times she'll come and she'll try to correct me on something I'm doing or not doing, and the way that she comes at me, it pretty much puts me puts me in the defensive, and like that, you can't come at me like that, because you're not going to get the right response. But today she came in and she just simply said, hey, I just want you, before you do anything, I just want to tell you, hey, why don't you just, you said that you believe your issue yesterday was tied to your disobedience. Well, before you get started on anything else, because this will be here, why don't you work on that message, even if it's just recording your voice, not even doing a video recording, but just recording your voice, just getting the message out, even if you don't upload it right now, just record it. So all you have to do is upload it, but do what you feel God has been calling you to do. Because if there's going to be more instances like that. And she didn't necessarily say that, but I knew in my mind that God is going to get your attention one way or the other. And he'll come, I believe he comes at you subtly at first. But when that doesn't work, then he steps it up. And so it was only at that unctioning that I went ahead and started recording this message. And even then, and this is just being completely honest and transparent, I was kind of begrudgingly doing it. Not that I didn't want to do it, but that I wanted to do other things and that wasn't that, and it wasn't that. And so because it was taking me away from other things that I wanted to do, me doing it was inconvenient, I would say. And when I analyzed that, because I'm a very analytical person, when I analyzed it and think about it, it made me feel like, man, what kind of a man am I that I'm inconvenienced by God? I'm inconvenienced by doing things that He wants me to do, that my desires are more important than what He's called me to do. And that's another thing that comes with disobedience, is the shame and the guilt of not doing what you're supposed to do. And when that shame and that guilt compile to the point to where to deal with it, you either get right, or you just ignore it and say, well, I just can't get right anyway, so I might as well just keep on doing my thing. And at that point you get further and further into your disobedience and ultimately sin, because being disobedient leads to sin if it's not sin directly. So I thank God though for a wife that is in tune with Him, that listens to Him, and that is not afraid to come and speak to me about where I'm at, that she feels comfortable enough that she will come and address me when she feels the need to. And I thank God for an ear to listen to it, even if it's not necessarily something I want to hear. I thank Him for giving me a heart to listen to her and to heed her wisdom. And it's not all the time, because we don't always agree, but a lot of times we do. And this is one of the times when we agree. I didn't like the fact that I'm not going to even say I didn't like the fact. I just want to say, at the moment, what I knew I was supposed to do wasn't in line with what I wanted to do. So I thank God for having a correctable spirit. So that's the procrastination. Second thing is just the laziness. I mean, there have been times when I didn't necessarily have anything else to do, and it was just the fact of me being lazy and not just getting up and taking the time to do the things that I needed to do. For instance, studying the passages that I was going to be speaking on, or taking the time to write down some ideas for that particular conversation, so that I could have a sort of like a roadmap and don't get kind of because I'm the type of person that if you get me talking, if I don't have a roadmap or a some notes written down to follow, I will go off on so many different tangents, and when it's all said and done, I done went all over the place instead of just hit the point and moved on. But I've noticed that one of my ways of getting messages out in an efficient manner is to write down notes and do my conversation based off those notes. And that, once again, all it requires is time to do that. And even times when I didn't even have anything else pre-planned, it was just my sheer laziness and not honoring God and giving Him that time. For instance, I might have been laying down and didn't want to get out of the bed, and had them slept all night, but still didn't want to just get up and give God that time. Or I'm watching a TV program and just, and not really watching it, just doing it just to be doing it, when I could have been doing something productive. Just laziness. There's no nice way to say it. it just is what it is. Laziness, you know. Um, and a lazy person is that's a bad way to be. That's a bad way to be. But so that was another one of the aspects of disobedience. And so as I was thinking about, my disobedience, I was, God kind of had, I believe the Father put on my mind the parable of the seed sower. And so I pulled that piece of scripture up so that I could I don't want to improperly quote it, and it comes from Matthew 13. I believe this is verse 3 through 9. And so I'm going to read this here for you. This is out of the King James Version. It says, "Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside. And the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up, because they had no depthness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But other fell into good ground, and brought forth fruit, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, some 30-fold. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear." And so, hearing that like that, you probably like, well, some people might be able to glean what it meant, but some others may not. So one of the disciples asked Jesus, what did you mean? Or he said, "Why did you speak like that when you're in crowds?" And he said, well, some people, once you've been given the Spirit of God, you can understand frank or blunt speaking like that. You don't have to think too much into it. That revelation will already be given to you because you have the Spirit of God in you. However, when you haven't been exposed to the Spirit of God, and you're new in Him, you're learning. You're like a baby. And like, if I was to go and have a conversation with a 5-year-old child, I wouldn't be able to talk to that child like I would talk to a 30-year-old man, because his or her level of understanding is different. So because of that, the majority of these people out here are babes in Christ. And so this is how they get that understanding, so that they can understand it and receive it, and not just hear me speaking and not really. And even though what I'm speaking is truth, they can't understand it because it's too advanced for them. So I had to kind of chew it up, and I couldn't give them solid meat. I had to chew it up and make it palatable for them. So he said, he went on. He said, he went ahead and he clarified for him. He said, so this is what it means. Let me find it here. See, this is a part of where I talk about, being prepared. And I didn't go through here and write this down, so I'm not having to look it up. But I think I pretty much got the gist of it to where I can explain it to you. And I have to find it here. I know it's in here, but I'm having to look too much for it. So he pretty much gave an example of like 2 or 3 different types of seed. One being the seed that was thrown, just thrown out into the path that is, widely walked upon and stuff like that. And he says, so some seed was thrown in the open path, and basically that's the type of people that hear God's word. And the whole point of this seed parable is me trying to figure out where I fit at. in those groups of people? Where did I fall at? If I had to analyze myself and say, okay, I'm going to fall somewhere within one of those C categories, where would I place myself if I had to honestly critique myself? And so I had to go through the list. And so the first list is the one that got the seed that fell on the path. And but it says the fowls of the air came and gobbled and devoured the seed, and people walked upon it and trotted on it and stuff like that. And basically that's just saying, hey, you hear the word of God and you receive it. If you hear it, I'm sorry, not that you receive, but you hear it. You hear the word, but because of other things that you got going on in your life, you say, you know what, I ain't got time for that. That ain't really got nothing to do with me. I don't really believe that, but you actually heard it. Like, say a missionary or a Jehovah's Witness, or maybe a family member was able to convince you to come to church one day, or a revival or something like that, and you went and you were able to actually hear a message, but your heart wasn't open to it. You really didn't want to be there anyway. And so even though you heard it, none of it rooted itself in your heart. And so it pretty much went in one ear and not the other, basically. So that's that first of the seed, that was just kind of that landed on the path, on the walked about path. And then it says some seed fell upon stony places, where they had not much earth. And so I had to say, okay, well, what? And so that type of person is basically, this person, they hear God's word and they receive it. So they don't just hear it. It's not to the point to where they just heard it and it went out one ear, it came in one ear and went out the next, but they actually heard it and was like, yeah, I believe that, I received that, yeah, that's for me. But the seed was not able to penetrate the ground. It pretty much the roots didn't penetrate deep into the ground, right? So yeah, they heard the word and they received it. So the word began, doing what it do. But because the word didn't penetrate deep down into their heart, the roots weren't stable, and so they were able to be rooted up because the roots weren't deep enough to where even if the surface of it was cut off, it could re-sprout up. But because there was no real root or depth to their walk, they fell away. And I said, well, I'm not the first set because I received the word. It's not just going in one ear and not the other. I mean, the whole fact that I'm doing this shows that it didn't just go in one ear and not the other. Okay. Am I the second group, the group that heard it and received it gladly? Okay, I heard it, I received it gladly. I began doing some of God's work, but there's no root, so it's not producing like it should. Could I be in that category? Quite possibly. I could possibly be in that category. And then the third category was the one that the seed that fell among thorns. And that group, that's the group that they hear the word, they receive it gladly, they begin doing the thing, they begin doing God's work and things that He called them to do. However, the thorns or the cares of this world grow up with them as they're trying to do God's work, and those cares begin to cut off the resources, or cut off the I'm trying to think of the right word here, they begin to chuck off the gift. And so the people become too consumed and concerned with the cares of the world and the circumstances that this life brings, that stuff comes up with them, like just living, family, jobs, material things, homes, houses, cars, money, that type of stuff also grows up with them. And at some point they get to the point to where they cut off that blessing, and those life trials become more of a focus than the call or the assignment that God has given them. And so it chokes off their blessing. It causes them to start focusing on those trials as opposed to focusing on the assignment, and ultimately they get caught up by that. So I said to myself, well, could I be in that category? Oh yeah, I could definitely see myself in that category as well. Not so much in the cares of the world and stuff like that, because that stuff, I mean, it really don't concern me. But there are certain things that do, like some things that I may say that I do for the purpose of not mixing work with my spirit life. Like, you won't see me posting things on social media that are faith related or God related. You don't see me post anything like that. And I say because I don't like mixing my personal life with my public life like that. But what are we really called to do, right? We're called to deliver the word, or to go out and spread the message. And if you're not willing to expose yourself in that way, then what is that really saying about you? Are you ashamed of him? Are you ashamed of God? Are you ashamed of his message? Are you concerned about what people may say, or what they, that's when those cares of the world begin to come up and choke off your blessing, because you're too concerned about what the world thinks, or other things in your life, how they may be affected by what you do for God. And so parts of that kind of fit my condition, and some of them don't. So, and then the final, and I'm getting close to the end here, but the final group of people is the seed that fell in good soil, and it fell in soil that where the root of the seed was able to get down deep into the soil, and that seed was watered and cared for, and was able to germinate and produce fruit, and bore fruit, and some bore 100-fold, some bore 60-fold, some bore 30-fold, like it. But the key ingredient here is that they all bore fruit. They all landed in that soil where they were able to get their roots deep down in the soil and actually produce some seed. Produce fruit. And I have to say, well, am I that group? And I definitely did not fall into that category, because I got these other things going on. So I fall somewhere in between group 2 and group 3. And here's the thing: it's not good enough. It's not good enough. In this life, we only get one chance to serve God and make it to the next level. We only get one chance, and in that chance, we only get so much time to do it, right? In the Bible, it says somewhere, I'm not going to take the time. I'm pretty sure if you type in Google some of these phrases you'll be able to find where the chapters are, because it's pretty much all there anyway. But there's somewhere in the Bible where it says he gives man 70 to 80 years to choose him. So you get 70 or 80 years, and some people get more than that, because we have well documented cases, even people now that are living now, that they're in excess of 100 years old. And then we have people that don't make it out of the womb, or those that die really young, teens, early 20s, stuff like that. But on average, a man gets generally anywhere from 70, 80 years to choose God, right? And you only get that one opportunity to do it, because once your time is up here, that's it. I don't think people really understand the finality of death in your natural life. The finality of it. The fact that, because you think about it, whenever we've done some things here in this natural life where we've gotten in trouble, majority of the time there was always the opportunity where, okay, we messed up, we did something wrong, we were able to get a second chance and get a chance to make it right, and this and that. And that also is evident in our relationship with God. He gives us so many chances to make it right. But when we draw our last physical breath on this earth, there's no more chances after that. It's the final say. That's where the buck stops. There's no more redos, no more I'm sorry, no more repenting, no more none of that. That's just that it's done at that point. And so many people check out of here thinking that they were going to have another opportunity to get it right, and that next opportunity didn't come for them. Their soul was required of them at some point, and they didn't get to make it right. And as I said, almost is not good enough for the kingdom of God. Either you are or you aren't. Either you do or you don't. And when you draw your last breath, you better sure well be among the group that did, or the one that says, I do, I'll go, choose me, or I did what you told me to do. You want to be counted in that group, because second place is just not going to cut it. Like in our natural world, if you make it within the top 3, you consider to have you've done well because you made it in the top 3. Well, in the kingdom of God, you got to come in number 1. Second place is just not gonna cut it. There's no runner-up prize. The only prize that's attainable is salvation. Now, what I will caveat to that is the service that you how you serve God while you're here will give you access to different rewards on the other side in heaven. But the very baseline gift is just achieving salvation and having heaven as your eternal dwelling place. That race you must win. You must win that race. You can't come in second there. And so I had to analyze myself in that particular scenario and say, am I coming in second place or am I coming in first place with what I'm doing? And the truth of the matter is, I wasn't coming in second, third, even fourth. I was way, 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 way down the line. If I had to consider it myself, if I had to judge it myself, right? I wasn't even doing enough to come in second, third, or fourth place. Not even the top 10. I wasn't doing enough of it. I know I wasn't doing enough to be there. And so I just thank God that His grace has covered me, and that it's been sufficient to keep me during during this time. But I understand, I'm not ignorant to the fact that at any point in time, my time could come up. I could draw my last breath. That could be my last opportunity to get it right. And with certain issues that I have, that's all the more likely, because I'm not the picture of health. I'm not in, I'm on my deathbed type thing. But what I'm saying is I could be in better health, and that's through my own actions as well. But at any point in time, and that's for anybody, even if you're the picture of health, your time it could be called. It could just be your time, and you need to be ready when that comes. And then I also had to consider another thing, and this is probably the last point. And there's a passage in the Bible. There's some passages where God talks about the people that have lived out their life, and as they're coming before Him to be judged for their deeds on this earth, some, as they approached Him, He said, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." There's another passage where He said there's going to be a lot of people that come to Him in that day saying, "Lord, Lord, didn't I do this in your name? Didn't I serve you? Didn't I worship you? Didn't I praise you? Didn't I win souls for your kingdom?" And this and that. And the Lord is going to look at them and say, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave. You saying you did all this, but you weren't really for me. You weren't really down for me. You didn't really serve me like you were supposed to." And that's kind of where I get that thing of almost is not enough. Because a lot of those people they're gonna legit feel like they were serving God, like they were doing His work, like they were even more so than what I feel like I'm doing. Because they're gonna feel like they were. I can honestly say that I have not been obedient. But there are gonna be people that truly believe in their heart of hearts that they were obedient to what God was calling them to do. And God is going to still look at them people and say, "You depart from me. Depart." That's a hard pill to swallow, man, because that means some people are literally going to be deceived in thinking that they were doing the right thing. And if you're thinking you're doing the right thing, what's to correct you to do the right? What if you're thinking you're doing the right thing but you're really doing the wrong thing? What would it take to get you to see the error of that? Because if you're not thinking that you're doing wrong, you have no conviction to do it right. And if you have no conviction to do it right, what does that say about you? Did you ever have God in the beginning? Did the enemy deceive you? Did he deceive you that hard? The way you actually thought you had it? What kind of person does that fall into? And I think about, these different religions. There's only one religion that's going to get you to heaven. God is the only way. And there are people out there that think that you can get to Him. I mean, Jesus is the only way. And there are people out there that think you can get to God in other manners. And it says in His Word that no one comes to the Father but through Jesus. No one comes to Him. So you can't get to Him unless you go through Jesus. And there are millions of people that ascribe to other religious doctrines that honestly believe that they're doing the work of God, and I believe that's where that's going to fall into, because they really believe in their heart that I got God and I'm doing this the right way, and God's going to have that word for them of depart from me, I never knew you. And that's going to be difficult. I don't even have I can't even wrap my head around it, really. And then there's the other statement: enter in, thou good and faithful servant. It's only one way to get to hear that statement as opposed to the other one, and that's if you are serving God to your fullest. That if you are doing what He's called you to do, that you get up. And that's not to say that you're not going to stumble, that you're not going to have trials and bumps on the road. But the difference is that you understand that you are not perfect, that you make mistakes, and that you recover, that you repent. God would never say that you had to do these things if you were never going to stumble and fall. The whole point that repentance and asking for forgiveness is a part of our lives is because we're going to stumble. Some of the most recognized and renowned saints in the Bible stumbled. They had their issues. Some of them were murderers, some of them were adulterers, some of them were all of it rolled into one. But they still had enough of a relationship with God. They understood that there was some error in their ways and that they needed to be corrected and that they needed salvation and forgiveness, and ultimately received it. So in closing, I just want to say, folks, that hey, don't take for granted the time that you've been given here to do what God's called you to do. Don't take it for granted. Just understand that at any point in time, your soul could be required of you, and it could be through no action of your own. You could be the picture of health. You could be doing, in your opinion, what God has called you to do, and at some point something could come along and just tragically take your life. And if you weren't where you needed to be in God, there would be no more chances to get it right. No more opportunities to ask for forgiveness. Ask for God to have mercy on you. Ask for Him to continue to let His grace abound upon you, and that you would get another opportunity to make this right wrong. Make this wrong right. Forgive me. You never know. So my advice to you would be to honestly go before God daily and have a conversation with Him where you just making sure that you and Him are on the same page. Asking Him to reveal to you where you are missing the mark, so that you will not get caught up in ignorance, because ignorance will not be a good excuse when you have to answer for how you live here. Oh, well, I didn't know. No, it's not going to suffice. And God is going to then show you where you did know, because every person that walks this earth is going to have a moment where they were exposed to God and where they had the opportunity to choose Him and they chose not to. Otherwise, He wouldn't be able to hold you accountable to that if you were never exposed to Him. So you're going to be exposed at some point. It's not going to be a valid excuse, but it's going to be up to you to go out there and get it and to go after Him. He'll come after you, but you also have to go after Him. So that's it, people. This message on obedience is mostly for me. Maybe it's for some of y'all. But know where you're at. Know where you're at in your walk with God. And if you're not where you're supposed to be, do yourself a favor and get it right. Get it right before there's no more opportunities to get it right. Because eternity is a really long time. I think there's somewhere in the Bible where it says that 1 year on earth is as 1,000 years with God. Or, I'm sorry, 1 year with God is as 1,000 years on earth. Or 1 day is as 1,000 days, or something like that. I think it's 1 year is as 1,000 years. So 1 year in heaven would be equivalent to the time span of 1,000 years on earth. Or what if it was 1 day in the presence of God was as 1,000 years on earth? Even trying to wrap your mind around that kind of time is hard, let alone eternity. There's no end to it. So if your destination wasn't heaven and it was hell in the lake of fire, and that was where you spent eternity, no relief, no let up, so much to where one guy in the Bible was quoted that said it was so hot, he was so thirsty that he was asking that some guy dip his finger in water and let it touch his tongue so that he could get a little relief from that little drop of water touching his tongue. I can't wrap my mind around it. But I tell you something that kind of, I'm gonna say this, give you this point, I'm gonna let you guys go. I was cooking dinner one night. I was baking some chicken in the oven, and you know how you got the chicken is baking for a while, and so the oven has done built quite a bit of heat, right? And you go to open that oven to check it, to make sure it's browning right and everything like that. Well, when I went to go and check this chicken I was baking, I had my face right down by the entrance of the oven. So when I opened the oven, I got a good hot blast of hot, air coming from out of the oven. And it hit me right in the face, and my reaction was immediate. Like, I immediately felt back, almost falling off my feet because it was so intense. But I remember when I felt that, I remember thinking in my mind, like, man, hell is gonna be so much hotter than that. And if that little heat right there, which was a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what's going to be felt in hell for eternity, for the people that go there, if that was unbearable to me, and that only lasted for a half a second, how much worse is how much worse is hell gonna be, where you're experiencing that for eternity? There's no end to it. There's no relief. That's just your reality for all eternity. That is a scary thought, people. Get your lives right. Stop being disobedient. Stop taking God for the game. Stop being cavalier with Him. Just stop doing what you're doing. If you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, stop doing what you're doing. And get yourself right with God before it's too late. Because when your time is up, it's up. I'll leave you with that. Until next time, pray for me if you're listening. Pray for me that I would continue in obedience, and that I would not fall into this state of disobedience again. It's my plan to put a message out next week, Friday of next week, because that usually starts my first day off. So that's gonna be my plan. I do have a lot of things going on next week. Friday will be my only day off, but God is the priority. So that all the other stuff don't really matter. What matters is that I get the message out. So pray for me that I would remain in obedience, and that the enemy, Satan and his demons, would be bound up, and that they would not win another battle on your behalf or mine. Thank you all guys for listening. Until next time, y'all take care.